April 29th, 2017, the night that changed my life. My name is Mallory Henderlong, and I am a survivor of sexual assault. Until March 28th, 2019, I was a victim of sexual assault. This is my survivor story. This is my testimony. Naturally, I let my rape define who I was. I allowed such a horrific experience to eat me alive. I struggled with accepting that it wasn't my fault, that what I was wearing that night didn't matter, that even though I had consumed alcohol didn't make it okay, that if I wouldn't have gone to that party, I wouldn't have been in that situation. If I would have just screamed no louder, maybe someone would have heard me. Maybe he would have gone off and out of me. I battled through loving my body, which felt like was no longer mine. Someone had just taken full advantage of every part of me. I hated being touched. I looked back over my shoulder everywhere I went. I struggled to sleep at night with the sheets rubbing up against me. I kept what felt like a huge secret inside me, worried of how others would view me. March 28th, 2019, there I was sitting in my therapist's office. We were talking about the upcoming Sexual Assault Awareness Month. She mentioned how if I was ready, she would love for me to share my survivor story on campus. The word survivor has stuck with me since. I decided to happily share my story so that others knew they weren't alone in this battle, and they too are survivors. Isaiah 61:1, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. God has anointed me. I am anointed for His purpose, to help people, to be the voice for the voiceless. I no longer let the enemy intimidate me, because there are miracles on the other side of my confidence in God. It was April 29th, 2017, my last week in a freshman year at Eastern Illinois University. The night started just like any other Saturday that school year. Around 6 p.m., my friends and I went digging through one another's closets to find a cute outfit, did one another's makeup, and made sure our hair was done just right. We were throwing one of our teammates a 21st birthday party, and it was about 9 p.m. when we began singing, dancing, drinking, and being social. I was surrounded by numerous people I had gotten to know throughout the school year, a lot of people I considered friends, including a few guys on the baseball team. One guy I had gotten to know pretty well and had studied and hung out with multiple times. He was someone that at one point I found cute, enjoyed being around, and even remember showing Mom a picture of while I was home for break. He was someone I thought I had gotten to know pretty well. As the night went on, this guy who I trusted offered me alcohol. Not worrying about it, I took the alcohol and began to engage in conversation, dance some more, and before I knew it, I was completely intoxicated. I left the party with a group of friends and this guy and headed to the bars. The next thing I remember is we left the bars, I looked down at my phone and it was 2:03 a.m. and I was with this guy I considered a friend. I felt extremely sick, dizzy, and was struggling to walk. I was obviously intoxicated and knew it. I knew I needed to go back to my room and get some sleep. Seconds later, he picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and began jogging in the opposite direction of my dorm. Rather, he was going in the direction of his apartment. I continuously asked him to put me down. He didn't. He climbed up the stairs of his apartment, took me to his room where he raped me. During this time, I was crying, kicking, trying to push him off me. When he was finished, he left the room. I was shocked, horrified, and traumatized. I went running out of the apartment. I looked down at my phone. It was 2:37 a.m. and I began calling and texting anyone I thought would answer. I was about a 10-minute walk from my dorm room, but was so intoxicated and shocked, I didn't know where to go. My friends Christian and John, who I had sent my location to, came and met me in the middle of campus, helped me back to my dorm room where my roommate was sleeping. The four of us sat in the dorm bathroom, where I was crying hysterically, kicking doors, and punching walls. My friend from home who I had called and texted called my parents. They called me freaking out, but I hadn't fully processed what had just happened. I eventually fell asleep in my dorm room and was woken hours later by my parents who had driven to campus. I felt like I was living a nightmare. I wanted to act like it didn't happen and just go on with my life. It was now the Sunday before finals week, meaning I had exams to study for and projects to finish. I refused to accept what had happened the night before. I sent my parents home, told them I wanted to finish out my last week of freshman year and not worry about what happened. That lasted until I woke up from a nap and my mom turned the car around and came to stay with me for the remainder of the week. It came time to take my chemistry final that I had studied hours for. My professor passed out the exam, and when the silence took over the class, I broke down in tears, stood up, and turned in my final mostly blank. I arrived back in my dorm room in tears, and that's when my mom and I decided I needed to see the school counselor and find out the different options of how to address what had occurred. I remember sitting there in the woman's office. She presented me with numerous options of how to report my rape. When she finished, my mom asked, "What if he's a male athlete? What if he's a pitcher on the baseball team?" She paused. There was an awkward silence for a few seconds. My stomach dropped, and that's when I knew I had already lost a battle that hadn't even begun. I felt empty, betrayed, and belittled. I finished my last finals, loaded up the car, and hugged my friends goodbye. Deep down, knowing I wouldn't be back next year. My athletic director was made aware of what had happened, and with such information was required to file a sexual assault report to the police and university president. With the athletic director, police, and university president knowing, I expected the situation to be handled properly. It wasn't. I ended up transferring, and he ended up still playing baseball at EIU. Back at home for the summer, I tried hard to push what had happened to the back of my mind. My parents forced me to see a counselor because I wouldn't talk to them or anyone else about what had happened or how I was feeling. I didn't like counseling though, and I felt like they were trying to fix me as if I was broken. I refused to go back to counseling and was stuck with all my thoughts in my head, and this constant sadness and anger took over my life. I went on with my typical summer activities that consisted mostly of working out and playing soccer. I let out all the emotion I was feeling in the weight room or on the soccer field. I began exploring other university options, and soccer ultimately led me to Spring Arbor University. I still remember when I went to visit campus for the first time. My parents and I were about 5 minutes from campus, and I said something like, "This isn't going to be the school for me if I have to go to chapel twice a week." I grew up in a Catholic home, went to church, but not because I wanted to. I knew of God, but didn't know who he was, nor did I have a relationship with him. It came time for me to make the decision of what school I was transferring to. And days prior, I told my mom, "I'm going to St. Francis." She told me to think about it for a day. The next morning, I woke up and I felt this overwhelming feeling that I was supposed to go to Spring Arbor. So I acted on that feeling and called and committed to the women's soccer team at SAU. After that phone call, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief and comfort. I now know that overwhelming feeling I felt that morning was God. He was speaking to me. He was leading me to a new beginning. I like to say that's when my relationship with Christ truly began. After my rape, Jesus became my best friend. He still is and always will be. The rest of summer, I felt kind of intimidated that I was about to attend a university where everyone was on fire for Christ and had memorized the whole Bible. I quickly realized that wasn't the case, and that everyone was on different walks with Christ and at different points in their faith. Being at Spring Arbor and attending those 2 days of chapel I once dreaded, I thought I would develop a deeper relationship with Christ without even trying. Well, I was wrong. I didn't begin to dive deeper into my faith and seek God daily until my university's J-term. First semester had gone pretty well. I entered a team of 40-something girls who were so loving and accepting. My roommates picked me up on my bad days and were there to encourage me to keep going. I had pushed what had happened to the back of my head until campus got silent and still during J-term. I found myself extremely broken, anxious, and depressed, and with tears streaming down my face almost every day. I began not sleeping well and experiencing awful flashbacks. Slowly working out wasn't a stress relief anymore, and anyone who knows me knows I love the weight room. While training one day, I broke down in tears, decided it was time to see a counselor again. I entered Carrie's office, and for the first time in forever, was able to share my whole story with her. I left feeling better. I was finding the support and help I needed in the people around me, but still had yet to turn to the one who would help me most. I began to put more effort into my relationship with Christ. My prayer life became more intentional, and I found myself enjoying the 10 to 20 minutes I would spend with God in the morning completing daily devotionals. Summer came around again, and I thought I had moved past what had happened. My relationship with Christ continued to blossom as I began attending a non-denominational church with my best friend instead of the Catholic Church. My summer days were very busy, leaving me exhausted at the end of the day, but towards the end of the summer, I began waking up every morning, and when I would roll over and look at my clock, it was almost always 2:37 a.m. One night, I woke up sweating and screaming. My mom came down to my room. I was shaking and afraid. As the days passed, I still found myself waking around 2:37 every morning, and I started to experience more night terrors than ever before. I spent more time writing in my journal and praying more than I ever have. In the midst of the summer struggles, I began reading Sadie Robertson's book, Live Fearless. In one of the beginning chapters, she listed Bible verses that she encouraged readers to memorize. I wrote those out, plus a few others I wanted to begin memorizing, and stuck them on my bathroom mirror. Others I put in my phone notes and would read when I was feeling anxious or depressed. Quickly, Isaiah 41:10 became my go-to verse and my strength during my weakest moments, and the reminder that God is always with me. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous hand." As my faith has gotten stronger and my relationship with Christ has grown, the way I allow this traumatizing experience to impact my daily life has been more positive than negative. Once during a sermon I was listening to, the pastor said, "The seasons of life that are the most fun aren't always the most fruitful, and the seasons of life that are the most fruitful aren't always the most fun." When I take a step back, I see how God worked in my life in miraculous ways during this season. It was one that came with many tears, long nights, and bad days, and was most definitely not fun, but one that was most definitely fruitful. It led me to forming a relationship with the Lord. God used this traumatizing experience to lead me to Spring Arbor, a place I initially would have never imagined attending school. A place that made me feel so welcomed and accepted, but pushed me outside my comfort zone. A place where my relationship with God blossomed and began to prosper. God placed me in the right place with the right people at just the right time. Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." People misunderstand this verse, thinking it says, "God works all things together for good," as if nothing bad will ever happen. Bad will happen. It happened to me, but in all things, God works for good. It doesn't guarantee that you won't find yourself in a mess, but does guarantee that God is with you and is working it out for your good. He helps me because he loves me, and I'm called by him. John 16:33, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world."